Warning, the stunts in this video are performed by professionals. Do not try this at home. Yeah. Hello people. I'm very excited because I have a really cool episode for you today. We're going to look at two things. We're going to look at my new drowning trap, a very compact, very efficient drowning trap that I created. And we're also going to look at this. This is a flaming arrow cannon, as you no doubt have guessed. So, and from now on, I like to keep my episodes a little bit shorter, between 20 and 25 minutes, because I know people's attention span isn't the best. So we're going to get right into this, and I'm not going to waste too much time. Now, this flaming arrow cannon was one of the first things that I came up with on my own. It's one of the first things I really wanted to do when I got good with redstone. The first version of it that I created was something like this, except that I didn't use a rapid pulsar. What I did was I used a series of clocks. And if you don't know what a clock is, read up on 4 and 5 clocks. They're pretty standard, but basically what a clock is something that toggles redstone on or off very quickly. And the typical one you see is a 5 clock. And, I mean, that sounds stupid. What the hell does that do? Well, it allows something like a dispenser to fire arrows very quickly, because it's constantly being toggled on and off by the clock. So, the first one that I created, the first version of this, I had to use, and Christina helped me with that wiring. I used a series of clocks, a 1 clock, 2 clock, 3 clock, 4 clock, and a 5 clock, all hooked together for redundancy purposes. That worked pretty well, but it was very big. I mean, the wiring was twice the size of all this combined, unfortunately. And we also used an AND gate, which didn't work. And now, if you didn't know, with redstone, if a redstone torch toggles on and off too quickly, eventually it will burn out and stop working for a period of time. And that's the issue when you're dealing with really fast clocks in Minecraft. So it made this, the whole dispenser thing, fairly difficult to get right. So this thing's gone through a lot of versions, and this was one of my attempts to simplify the wiring. All we have here is a pressure plate connected to an inverter, which is connected into the rapid pulsar clock, and then the output of the clock and the inverter goes to this block, which is actually should be a dispenser, but I don't have an extra. And then we have a torch here, which keeps the dispenser on. It's kind of a bug. I'll explain that later. And basically what happens is when I step on the plate, you can see that starts blinking, and that fires the arrows. But the problem with this, when I step off the plate, it stops. Now that doesn't sound like a problem, but what happens if I do this? It's going to fire like 2 or 3 arrows, basically, and I'll be safe. You know, your target will not die, basically, unfortunately. So that wasn't an option. That was simply a bad way of doing it. So I moved on. And I realized what I had to do was create a monostable circuit. And a monostable circuit, if you've watched my videos, you know what it is. It's a device which turns a circuit on or off after a certain period of time. I've used it to keep doors open for a certain period of time before they close. That's another good application for it. But essentially what I wanted to have happen is once they activate this plate, the dispenser would fire for a predetermined length of time regardless of whether they were still standing on it or not. And that's definitely the way to go. I also could toggle the dispenser permanently with using a latch, but that would fire all 64 arrows and be completely overkill, and you have to restock the dispenser after every successful trap, basically. So that wasn't a good option. That's why I had to use the monostable in the end. Now, I tried to do a couple of things. I tried to create a monostable circuit with a piston here. To simplify the wiring and make it a little bit less big, basically. But that didn't work. Unfortunately, I tried to cut out the latch altogether, and that was the problem. It's difficult to see what's going to happen, but when I step on this plate, it's going to pretend this is a dispenser. When I step on the plate, what's supposed to happen is the dispenser is supposed to fire until the current from this section goes through, and this block gets pushed to cut off the current that goes to the dispenser. But watch what happens. it actually stops firing before the monostable circuit is even getting to the piston, which is supposed to close it off. So that didn't work. There was basically no way to cut the latch out of this wiring. So I finally settled on this version, and pardon me while I skip today. Now I apologize if this is very confusing. If you haven't done a lot of redstone, it will be confusing, and even if you have done a lot of redstone, this is a very advanced circuit. So I promise I'm going to release a separate video which shows you a tutorial of how to build this, and it'll also explain how everything works in detail, but I'll give you a quick rundown of how this thing works. Now when I step on this pressure plate, or a target steps on the pressure plate, two things happen. One, the first thing that happens is the current travels into this latch, this circular thing right here. Now what happens is the latch activates and it switches from this side being on to that side being on. And then what happens is when that side is on and this is off, this rapid pulsar is no longer getting a current from the latch, which lets it pulse freely, basically. It sort of frees it up to start pulsing very fast, which fires the dispenser. The second thing that happens when I step on the plate is current also travels through these repeaters. Each has a delay, a maximum delay of 4, all the way through this line, which travels to the latch reset. And what the hell does that mean? Well, essentially what's happening is when I step on the plate, the dispenser starts firing, and then we have a delay here of, say, 7 or 8 seconds, which goes into the latch reset, which turns this side back on, and then stops the dispenser from firing. That's how the monostable circuit works in this context. Okay, now that I've explained how this works briefly, and probably badly, and I apologize for that, I'm going to point out one little thing here. This repeater is, and remember, repeaters are directional. The power only flows in this direction, forward. It doesn't flow backwards. And the reason that this is here is to prevent this pulsar from activating the latch. Because what was happening is I stepped on that plate and it would start firing for a few seconds, and then the pulsar would reset the latch and it would stop firing. And that was really annoying, so I had to isolate this input with the repeater. And like I said, I will make a tutorial on this and show you how everything works in detail. But for now, this is pretty cool. I mean, it's just really epic. And finally, we have a torch here. That's kind of a bug. The whole system doesn't work unless you have a torch providing a constant state of power to the dispenser. I think that's a bug in the system, but who knows if that's actually intentionally how redstone's supposed to work. But anyway, in essence, in summary, what happens is when you step on the plate, the dispenser fires for exactly 24 arrows worth into its target and then stops itself from firing. Now the other thing, I have to use a stone pressure plate here, because if something dies on top of the pressure plate, it drops loot. And when the pressure plate is toggled, it actually creates a forbidden state in the latch with both inputs being on. I don't expect you to understand that, but I'll explain it again in the tutorial. And that's bad, because then it would keep firing until it ran out of arrows, and then still fire until the loot on the pressure plate despawned. But I solved that more or less by having a stone pressure plate, which is only activated by someone standing on it. So when they die, it automatically turns itself off. So that's how that works. And the arrows are flaming, obviously, because they're passing through lava. You don't need this. It's completely optional, and the flaming arrows don't do more damage or anything like that. They just look really cool. And now a demonstration. And notice I took that off the pressure plate for a while, and it was still firing. That's because the monostable circuit was going. Alright, so that's my flaming arrow cannon. It has some limitations, of course. Unless you're standing in the way of the arrows, they won't kill you, obviously. So this is really best in either a one-wide hallway where you can't escape from the arrows, or you could chain multiple dispensers together to create a field of fire which you cannot escape. That works pretty well as well. However, the wiring is a little bit more difficult because you're going to have to stack dispensers, and you're going to have to move some of this wiring further out and spread it out basically. It'll be a little bit more difficult, but definitely doable. So that's my flaming arrow cannon, and I hope you like it. I do. I love it. We are going to move on here, and we're going to look at the new drowning trap. And here you can see this is my new passive mob system, and this is the new drowning trap. You can see it is much, much smaller than my last trap. It is very, very compact, really. This is about as compact as you can make a drowning trap, and it's 100% effective despite how small it is. You would think these cows would be falling through the bottom of the trap, but they are not. And that's really the beauty of this whole thing. And their loot drops perfectly fine and goes into my loot collector, which I currently have toggled off because I don't want to receive any more farm animal loot right now. And it works no matter how many mobs are in there. I've actually had more than 10 in that little trap all at once, and that pig is not supposed to be in there, pig. That pig is supposed to go into the pig separator. You bastard. But he's gonna die anyway. Something like 1 in every 100 pigs or so gets past the pig separator, unfortunately. And I don't think there's any way to solve that, but not a big deal. But this is about the drowning trap. Now, this works on the principle of sort of a reverse mob evader. And if you've seen my other episodes, you saw me build a mob elevator for the Colosseum. I'm going to turn the F3 off there. And when I showed you how to build a mob evader, you remember that I had to fill each block of the mob evader with source water. I had to do it for each level, all 4 blocks. And the reason for that is mobs would not swim up unless there was source water. If there was falling water on top of them, in other words, if I put source water blocks at the top and just let the water fall down, they would actually sink and they wouldn't be able to swim. So it kind of works on that principle but reversed. What I did here is, you notice, let me go up to the top, show you guys what's actually happening up here. Okay, as you can see, there's a drop right here, a 2-block drop straight into the pit of death, the drowning trap, and that allows him to break the surface. And that surface there are there's only actually 2 source water blocks up there, and that allows the water to fall down. And since they're falling in and they're breaking the surface, they start sinking because they're in falling water. Basically, there's only 2 source blocks at the top, so that water is pushing them down. And that's how my original drowning trap worked. Except it had to be really long, so they actually would have time to die before they reach the bottom. Now this one is a little bit different. The bottom level of the water, instead of just being that falling water from the top, the bottom level, the very bottom, right there above the signs, is all source water blocks. So what's actually happening is they're falling in, breaking the surface, the water is pushing them down until they reach the bottom level, which is source water, and then when they reach that level, they actually try to swim up. As you can see, they're trying to swim right now because they're standing in source water blocks, and that's how mob behavior works, and that's what's allowing them to drown. They're getting caught in the middle and they cannot escape. They can't go up and they can't go down. And that's the beauty behind this trap. It's only 5 blocks tall. It might be 6, I don't really remember. But I think you could do a minimum of 4 blocks tall with a 2-block drop. So that would make the entire trap 6 blocks tall. Now that is really small. Really, really small. And I'm very proud of this invention. And the reason I had to use this in the first place, you're wondering probably why I didn't use a lava blade. Well, I tried that, actually, first. And lava blades work really, really nicely for tall mobs because they don't actually try to swim up in them when they hit the lava. They just get stuck and they die and their loot falls behind them. But passive mobs are a little bit smaller in terms of height. And what actually happens when they hit lava blades is they try to swim up in the lava, and a lot of the loot actually gets destroyed. I'm not sure if someone has solved this. Maybe someone has, but that was my experience with the lava blade. And I wanted to be 100% sure that I was getting the loot from these drops, because I noticed with the lava blade, I was losing close to 50% of the loot, and that's simply unacceptable. Maybe 5% would be acceptable, but absolutely not 50. It goes without saying, I think. So I had to find a new killing mechanism that was not only time efficient, but space efficient. And the first thing I tried was fall damage. That works really nicely. However, there's really no way to move the loot if you use fall damage. You'd have to stand under where the mobs are dying and pick up the loot manually. I couldn't, in other words, move it to my house. Because unfortunately, if mobs fall in water, a lot of them do not die, no matter how tall you make the drop. So the only other option that was that would preserve loot was a drowning trap. So this thing caused me a lot of frustration, this whole system, but I eventually won through and I came up with this new trap, and I'm very happy I did. It works really well, and I'm going to make a separate video that will give you a tutorial on how to build this, and it's very simple. You can build it day one in Minecraft, and it's really quite cool. And over there we have the chicken killer and the pig killer all in one. You can see that these chickens are not having a good day. And all the bacon, all the pork chops drop right there, and they drop cooked because the pigs die from fire. Yeah, there's one. So I will give you another episode that will detail this entire system. It's my best passive mob system to date. I think it is my best mob system to date. Though my hostile system is certainly really good as well. It's hard to choose my favorite between these two. But this has much more interesting ways of dying for the animals. But yeah, those are the two things that I wanted to highlight this episode. I think I've done it well, and I think I know I didn't explain everything that needed to be explained, but they're going to be separate videos for that, just so I don't bore people to death. Maybe someone wants to learn about the drowning trap, but doesn't really give a damn about this arrow cannon, and maybe vice versa. So I'm gonna let you choose what you want to see. Maybe you want to see both. So I'll be releasing those hopefully in the next week or two. It's going to take a little bit of preparation because I have to basically build new versions of both of these, so it's going to be a pain in the ass. But yeah, that's the end of the episode. Next episode, not sure what we're going to do. I might do the passive system, show you how the separators work and that kind of thing. Or I might show you some of my newer inventions. This over here is a horizontal TNT cannon that I've been working on. Still not perfected, but it's getting there. This is a TNT dispenser, basically an auto loader for the cannon. Also not perfected, but I think I have a better method of doing it that's going to work nicely. This was my attempt at creating a flip-flop, which is an advanced memory cell from scratch. That didn't work out too nicely. In fact, it's an epic fail. But I was working on one because I figured I could use it with the arrow cannon, because I would need a flip-flop to toggle with the pressure plate. I needed to convert it from I think a short pulse to a constant pulse, and I needed to use a flip-flop to do that, a T flip-flop. And that would have been a very good way of doing it, but then I came up with the monostable idea, and I thought that was better than just toggling it, so this worked out better. In any case, not sure what I'm going to do next episode, but it's going to be fun whatever it is. And until next time, this is Rackles signing off.